safety, ethical AI, operators. So these are the kind of jobs that will be there in the future. The students therefore have to think about this. The most important question that is to my mind as a person of governance in AI is that the India is built as a nation on the basis of three pillars. Indian constitution is built on three pillars. The pillars which of course during the French Revolution, we call it justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. So basically, how do these pillars get affected because of AI? Will justice be better or justice will be biased? Will the truth will come forward? Today, in fact, let me say when we have an argument, we are arguing on the basis of biases. Today we want an AI as a referee to say who is right. Because then you don't have to like say that he's wrong, he's biased. You would rather have an AI as an interpreter, as a judge than a human. So this justice going to change. That's one thing. Second, we talk about liberty. There is not going to be privacy. AI actually is there in every step of your life. If you go to China, you will see that when you're walking, what you're eating, what you're doing is all monitored by the state. And AI will bring you to that stage. Today we go into the airport and your face is that who you are, what you are, and then you can go through because AI is monitoring you. So what is the implication on liberty? What is the implication on fraternity? Today there are so many biases, like whether there is a black white and or a casteism in India. So how does this AI affect these biases? Will it be able to show up, put the hand up and say you're being biased? Because today a lot of things are undercover, naked. The biases are naked. In AI, bring about better things here. So these are the things. This is the background. AI has come to stay, and then Elon Musk says, and let me just end the opening remarks by saying, Elon Musk says that by the end of this year, we'll have AI which is more intelligent than human by the end of 2026. He says by the end of 2027, there will be AI models which is more intelligent than the whole of humanity combined. And then he says, within 4 to 5 years, there will be humanoids, robots who will do the work. And the prediction of whether it is Oracle, Anthropic CEO, or Sundar Pichai, or whether it is Arun Zoho, or whether it is Elon Musk, they say that jobs will completely decline in other places. Jobs will only be in the space of AI. And what will happen is everybody will get a minimum basic income. The work will be done by humanoids and robots 5 years to 7 years down the line, and all human beings will have a question or the challenge before humanity will not be work. The challenge because you get income, you get luxury, producibility will be abundant. The challenge before humanity will be what is the motivation? Is there a motivation when everything is being done by humanoids? Or is there something left of humanity? So I still believe, my thinking, before I hand it over to the expert, is that AI depends on databases, AI depends on existing databases. It cannot do abstract thinking. It cannot think about visionary thinking. So human beings always will have visionaries, will have abstract thinkers. That part, there will be some part which probably AI cannot do. Okay, but we are progressing in a direction from being assistant to co-author. AI has become now not chatbots. It has now become chat GPT. We have become AI agents. And tomorrow, instead of us discussing, my agent will talk to your agent, and both are AI agents. And just to conclude my opening remark, let me just say, I had a great friend called Arjun Rao, and he said that a year ago he said that I will never allow AI to take over my company. And 6 months down the line, he closed his company. He said, because I have to lay off over 50% of my employees. AIs can do better work than most of them. And I don't want to be doing that, so I sell my company and let somebody else take that decision. I can't stand on the fact that I'm reneging on my verbal promise that I will not lay off. And therefore, he sold his company and has gone into a meeting. He said, I'm retired. This is the world of AI. So with these opening remarks, I come to my panelists, co-panelists. The first question is to Mr. Hari. And the question is, Mr. Hari, please tell us, in this world where you have talked about AI architecture, you have talked about education policy, he has written a book called Reverse Gold Rush. And he has said how all students should talk about becoming AI literate through a 10-step process. What should the writers, teachers, and students do in this AI world?
Thank you, sir. Okay, that was a large canvas that you covered, honestly, and in such a short span. Wonderful. Okay, I will not get on to a lot of things that you covered. Sad to hear your friend's story, but yes, that is the truth. There is no running away from it to a large extent. We'll come to the question. So what should the students and the faculty do and things like those? See, the question is that right now we are perhaps, if there are, let's say, 10 layers at which this technology is going to move, we are maybe at the fourth leg of it, or maybe close to the fifth leg of it. But I think there's a lot two plus 2 is equal to 4, it can't be anything other than 4. So the paths are clear. AI is a probabilistic technology. So that is, I'm not saying, things like 1 plus 1 can be 2 or this can be that. No, it's not like that. It's like, think of it like any answer in economics or anything like that. Like there are 4 or 5 valid answers to this. And out of these 4 or 5 valid answers to this, which is the one most valid to the present situation or to the present condition? That judgment is largely the humans. If a human is going to outsource that judgment to AI, okay, that is exactly where the problem is. Okay. Now, having said that, learning AI as a probabilistic technology is one skill for you as student or faculty. But more importantly is, have you learned enough in your domain, be it law, be it economics, be it even politics, be it even in the government space, the kind of administration, to make this judgment which is thrown to you. So AI has thrown you around 10 options or 7 or 8 options. Okay, then can you come up with that judgment? Okay, so this is the critical difference to one appreciate to work to. Now things will get complicated basically because this I am talking about you using AI with a system as a human user. But the moment we create an agentic workflow, we are basically saying we have created an agent and then we have given it judgment possibilities, options to work with another agent or multiple agents. Now, who has to decide what are the boundaries of these judgments that this agent can make, which is triggering off another agent? So you got it. You starting with your laptop is one level. The other level, abstraction layers of this. Okay. So largely, actually, the human becomes more important. Okay. Very, very oddly and very, very strangely at this point of time it may seem, but it will. And to a large extent, honestly, with the kind of appetite that human beings have for variety, you know, there is so much variety that human beings want. You know, somebody wants long hair, somebody doesn't want hair, somebody wants so many things. You want this kind of fashion, that kind of color, that kind of taste, so many kind of things. Human wants are unlimited to a large extent. And those spaces, along with this probabilistic technology where judgment is important, okay, I actually think in a year and a half's time, you are actually going to have more opportunities, more jobs than lesser, honestly, than what Musk says. But the problem is how many people will learn this trajectory decently to reach there when the opportunity strikes. I think I've been too long. So,
Sir, so your exposition has been also slightly scientific and a little abstract. So while the students, I hope they will understand, because you are the subject matter expert. So let me just simplify what sir said, is that human beings are not perfect, whereas AI is a perfect kind of a tool. So the human imperfections, human choices is something that AI can never adopt. For example, if you have a lawyer, the lawyer can only speak your case. Okay, you put the lawyer who is representing your case in the court of law as an agent. He is your AI agent, and he represents you and says what you want. He says, don't give that lawyer the right to say what you should be saying. He should be saying what you want to say. But supposing the lawyer begins to say that you're wrong, I will tell you what you must do, that becomes the issue where the AI agent or the lawyer takes over the job of the client, the job of you, then it becomes a problem is what he's trying to say. And he says that human beings are basically imperfect. They might like somebody. You might ask somebody and say, why do you like this person? It might be for any reason. You might say this person is short, dark, bad looking, but it can still be right. And then the lawyer might say, what's wrong with you? But the human being will say, that's what I want. So the difference between what a lawyer will say and what a human being wants is where AI cannot be, is what I think the person is trying to say. So let me just go to the second panelist of ours. Anne Gordon has traveled the world, all of you are aware. In fact, I think she has seen the history of the world because she's written books in 197 countries. One book of every country. You imagine you're writing a book on India, you're writing a book on Sierra Leone, you're writing a book on whatever, different parts of the world, and you know about each. When you're writing a book, you are actually giving yourselves to that country, to that nation, to that ethos. So she has experienced 197 cultures and ethos. And today we see that most of the stories and most of the so-called Ivy Leagues, we have students producing literature very beautifully done. Not with, say, literally or with AI. What are your thoughts? How does it affect writing and your thoughts is whether you can capture the ethos and what you have experienced in various countries? Your thoughts on it?
Well, I wanted to pick up on what you were saying about imperfections, because reflecting on my quest, reading a book from every country, which I set out to do in 2012, imperfections, the cracks in the way are where the light gets in, as far as I see it. So I wouldn't think of them as imperfections so much as part of our human nature that actually allows flashes of brilliance at times. And my quest is a great example of that, because when I set out to read a book from every country in the world, and 2012 is a very different world, obviously, I realised I needed help because I knew nothing about most of the world's cultures, and so I needed suggestions. Now, if I'd asked AI, which book should I read from every country in the world, I probably would have got a very canonical list of perhaps the most celebrated writers in every country or the most sold books in each country. And that maybe in itself is interesting, and maybe I'm now thinking I should see what AI would recommend in that case. Instead, what I got was a whole host of recommendations from all over the planet, from people who put forward suggestions that were often not the most celebrated writer or the most canonical choice. And in fact, as I went on, I made it my point to not make the obvious choice where I could. India was a great example of that, as you can imagine. I mean, goodness, how do you choose a book from India? It's such a rich literary tradition. And I had a huge number of recommendations coming in, and whenever I tried to ask someone to help me choose, they just suggested more books. Very anti-AI, they did the opposite of what I was requesting. And then I had a journalist in India, Sunita Balakrishnan, who left me a message saying, I see that all the books people have recommended are books written in English, but to my mind that's second best to our literatures in languages other than English. And she said that her favourite writer was M.T. Vasudha van Nair, the Malayalam author. So I thought I got a translation by him, but I think that rather lengthy anecdote shows this idea that the human, maybe slightly maverick, wandering way of thinking about things, not making the obvious choice or the probable choice in the way that AI does, as you say, is part of what makes us who we are. And so in terms of how it affects writing, I think that speaks to writing because, you know, now with Microsoft Word, the latest version I have has this co-pilot, where it's constantly wanting to use AI to correct my writing or to suggest another way of saying things. And I resist that because I resist using it because I think that's a homogenizing influence that will, it may in some cases suggest a more efficient way of saying something, but it actually will flatten out my style, my individual voice. And so I do use AI. I'm not someone who is a refuser of AI. I think all of us do in our lives, whether it's spam filters or email or internet search. But I think it has to be used with thought, with mindfulness. What am I doing here? What is the benefit and what is the potential risk or harm? And when it comes to writing, I think our individual voice speaking to one human being to another is important. In the UK, there are now bookshops that say we will only stock books written by humans, because the whole point of writing, in many people's minds, is human-to-human communication. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. So that is one thing to the students. Students, like, you know, sometimes when you listen to a singer singing on the stage, you hate it if it's only lip syncing. If it's lip syncing and the song is perfect, you'll enjoy. But if you come to know who is lip syncing and not actually singing it, you'll be very disappointed. A singer will be imperfect, a singer will be singing sometimes off tune. You will enjoy but actually live. So that's what I was saying, if I may call that. What she's saying, that she will not use co-pilot because it may be more perfect than what she's writing, but she does not bring out what she is. And with her imperfections is what she wants to remember as an author. So she says that somehow it's blaming out of the fact that the imperfections of human beings is what will separate AI and the future. While AI makes us more and more perfect, production good, products good, it will not touch the core of humanity. That's what we're trying to say. And when we come to Richard Joshi, our author, the distinguished gentleman on the far left of me, he has written the big letter Mahabharata and Ramayana, an 899-page book. The Great Eastern, the times where the most creative minds like Rangghar, Tagore, the colonists, the British, the turmoil, the period of turmoil in the world, and he brought out the epic in which human emotions are done, So I want to know, you see all the students here, they are the Gen Z or Gen Alpha generation. Their attention span is 1 minute at most, 20 seconds on an average. They look at Instagram, and after maybe 20 seconds, they have to go to the next thing. They say, oh boy, they cannot sustain more than 20 seconds. How do you expect them to read a 900-page book?
Okay, so first of all, because I'm not AI, that wasn't the plan. The plan was to write maybe 3 books of, I guess, what, 200 pages each maybe, and bring them out across 3 years or something. B.K. Kartika, who's held my hand as an editor for 10 years through this long process, and more than 10 years actually, is witness to it. She was there when we were trying to discuss how to break the book up, how to break up the narrative, keep it together, what do we do with it? Because I work very collaboratively with my editors, people, friends who read, etc. Somehow the novel became such that you couldn't break it up, you couldn't, and it had its own logic. Now, if it was written by AI, I'm sure that could have been instructed, find a narrative arc that ends fully on page 268. Find the next narrative arc that ends fully in the second book on, say, page 250. And like that could have been a 3-volume book. But because I was writing as a human being and was experiencing things while I was writing it, the book grew and it took on a shape and size that I was not expecting. And that is why I'm an artist. Because I want to be surprised by what I produce, and what I produce has to kind of take me over and at some level talk back to me and control me, not in the way AI or robots control you, but where your own creation, you have a set of logics and a set of actions that you have set in motion. And because of your own choices, those logics and those motions and those characters and those story arcs tell you that you can have this, but not this. In the same time period, somebody else could write a completely different novel. So basically, as I was moving towards finishing the novel, another friend of mine, writer friend, called up and said, "How long is your book?" And I said, "It's about, it's going to be about 900. He says, "Are you mad? No one's going to read your book. No one's going to read it. People don't read more than 200 pages now. Forget it. And he was right. He himself, I won't name him, but he's just produced a brilliant novel, but a difficult memoir about his family, which is novelized. And that is itself about 300 pages. And if you look at that book and you look at my book, the storyline chugs along, whereas he demands much more from his readers in terms of abstraction, decoding poetry, looking at memory. And it's a very different kind of novel/non-fiction book that my friend has produced. I would argue that for many people it would be easier to read my 900 pages than his 350 pages. But so that is the nature of size, and actual numbers don't tell you the whole story. But I did feel a kind of perverse pleasure, I have to say, Kalyan, that if people don't have attention spans, the hell with it. I'm going to go against the grain and produce what I want to produce, right? And it's all about young people. Young people, forgive me. But you guys one day will not be young people anymore. So my guess is, if you don't read the book today, maybe 20 years later, some of you will. I can't gear my entire output towards this imaginary Gen Z or Gen X or Gen whatever you name, because they are the market and they have to be pleased and one has to dance to their tune. Attention spans at the moment are 1 minute, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, whatever. When people get bored of that and different things start to happen, different things start to short circuit, out of sheer perversion and out of sheer rebellion and out of sheer, like, you can go against the government, like you can go against what is the logic of mainstream society and say, I'm not going to do this. Similarly, if everybody's got a short attention span, gradually people will start saying, no, I'm going to do slow. I'm going to do analog where everyone's doing digital. That kind of stuff will also grow. So there'll be corners, breakages, cracks, dropouts, glitches. And I love breakages, cracks, glitches, as Leonard Cohen has said. Value the crack because that's how the light gets in, right? So, I wrote the book. Some days I regret it because I think, for example, it's been very well received in India, but abroad, There has to be, it is struggling in a different way. You're getting people to read a 900-page book about a historical period from 70 years ago in a far-off country, is a challenge. And getting translators to translate it into German or French or Italian or any of these other European languages, because languages, if you have a 500-page book in English, it will be 700 pages in German or 800 pages in French. So my book in 900 pages is daunting for publishers to take on another language. So that's a price you pay. People say, I bought your book, I'm looking at it, but I can't carry it with me on flights. That's the price you pay. However, it's a kind of, what I call it is an anti swiping book. Okay, so if people have talked about first screen, second screen, the book itself has its first screen, second screen stories going on. And if you want, and what I'm demanding from you as a writer is that you put away your phone, you put away your television, you put away your distractions. Don't listen to music while reading my book, or my book has music in it, and pay attention to the book. And those of you who I can convince will read the book, and others will read the book later. I'm confident of that. That's what I have to say to myself.
Yeah.
If I may, I just wanted to pick up something. I'm very interested by the research on attention spans, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. However, I should say, in defence of young readers, many of the people who engage with my project and who I hear from about the world still to this day are young readers. There is a lot of appetite and interest in reading internationally among the younger generation. And in the UK, in fact, research that was done for the International Booker Prize shows that the biggest cohort of buyers of translated literature are under 35s. So I think we shouldn't be too pessimistic about attention spans among young readers. I think attention spans among older readers are perhaps also challenged.
You want to say something?
No, I just want to say, if you ask AI a question, you will not get this answer. But I'm being a human being has produced surprising answers.
So how many students here would like to read the book by Richard Doshi, 900 pages? Put your hands up. Let me see.
We will order 7 copies, I think.
You say, sir, will buy the book? All of you who have raised the hand will have to buy the book.
No, you can buy it from the library, it's teaching from a bookshop, I don't mind.
I want to see how many
book that I've got, which is in the
wow. Okay, we will have somebody to buy the book. Okay. So that's, a lot of people are interested to read the book if you give it free. But there are 3-4 of them who say that they will buy the book if it's okay.
I shouldn't say this, but there is one website where your books make it and you can do free downloads. It's illegal. And someone told me that this book was made it there. So if you have...
So he is suggesting that...
I'm just letting you know this is a piece of information.
So let me just tell Mr. Richard Joshi that one of the icons of Assam, Lakshmana Bezgora, wrote a lot of short stories. And one of the short story was called Patmugi. It's a very interesting story. In today's world, that story was written into the reader's canon. It is about a young girl who marries a Brahmin boy who deserts her, and her uncle goes to fight her case in a separate village. And the girl says, I don't want this husband who has abandoned me. After going all the way there, she says, he's not worth my time. But while coming back, this young girl and the uncle have an attraction between them. He goes back with full of guilt, he doesn't see her later. And this is a short story that is there. It's actually probably a autobiography, and everybody told him, don't write this. Are you mad? He actually published it, and it was one of the bestsellers in those times. So I see the rebel in you like that. Yeah. So would you like to ask any questions?
See, what I'd like to ask, yeah, I'm not there. See, the question of homogenization that you talk about is real. There is no denying that to a certain extent. The breaking of the homogenization is also a human enterprise. Okay. Now, when the dictionary was introduced, or when the thesaurus was introduced, or when the Gutenberg press came, what do you reflect upon happened to the homogenization?
Yes, you're quite right. I mean, this is a point that I often make. People often, when new technology comes in, there is an alarmist sort of sense that it's the end of everything. It's going to destroy our society, destroy our art, destroy how we think. In fact, you can trace it right back to Plato's Socrates. He was very skeptical about writing. He thought the practice of writing and reading itself would be harmful because it would stop people remembering. So you're quite right. There is an element of every time we see a new wave of technology come in, we fear and perhaps we are a little too alarmist about what may happen. So I think there is truth, and for that reason I try to resist being too alarmist about these things. I do, at the same time, I think perhaps there's a rate of change and an amplification of the change that is more extreme than we've seen with previous waves of technology. The internet has accelerated how we live, it's accelerated the changes, and as you said, there's still some way to go before we reach the final layer of AI. You said maybe you thought 2040 or so we have some time, but nonetheless, things are changing rapidly. And it means that changes get assimilated into people's lives unthinkingly often, because it just becomes the way things are done. And I suppose the truth is with things like the dictionary, well, the dictionary is a static thing, but it is revised, and there are multiple dictionaries, so you're not held by one standard, perhaps. I mean, when it first came in, yes. So I suppose, yeah, there's a truth of plus ça change. There's an element of things stay the same more than they change, and we shouldn't be overly alarmist about it. But I think we should try and be mindful and notice what these things are doing to our own practice as readers and writers, and be selective about what we incorporate into our working life.
An attendant point, I was listening to somebody speaking, and they reminded me on one of the social media things where they said, before photography was invented in the 19th century, one of the main functions of a painter or an artist or a sculptor was to create a likeness of someone, right? And that would be the only likeness that would go down in history, because there was no photograph. So you basically made sure someone made a good picture of you if you were rich enough or powerful enough, that picture would be your likeness, and people would see you. A lot of your public, for example, if you're a king or a queen, would not be able to see you directly, but they could maybe see photos or etchings of your face and understand who you were. Things like this. So, and landscapes and houses, and people travel to India, for example, the Daniels, and they make these etchings of these views of India, which of course went back to the British magazine and the London magazines, and they were printed, reproduced there. And there were no photographs, so this is how people saw the Ajanta Ellora caves, or the Himalayas, or the Hooghly Ghat in Calcutta, or the Banaras Ghats, the South Indian temples, all this stuff. Then comes photography. And when photography comes, a lot of artists go into complete panic, and a lot of people go into complete panic that now art is dead because photography is there. What is the point of having someone painting? It is obsolete, and they've destroyed this wonderful craftsmanship of artists, and it's over. Is it over? No. What happens is the smarter artists, people like Picasso, or the Impressionists, or the other Western artists, and definitely even our miniature painters, etc., who were doing the same thing, they all carried on and created new forms and found new ways to express themselves visually, where they no longer had to do the boring reproductional work which was taken over by photography, and in some ways by filmmaking. And then photography and filmmaking led to their own creative art forms afterwards, right? So we don't know, I mean, speaking philosophically, we don't know what AI will bring us. If suddenly there's a whole bunch of people who don't any longer need to sit there doing accounts, or doing coding or doing a certain kind of work, which becomes completely like, oh my God, that's what people used to do in the old days. No, machines do that now. That free brain space, that human brain space that's freed up, who knows what kind of creativity it will lead to? We cannot imagine stuff. Like someone in Shakespeare's time or someone in Kalidas's time could not imagine aircraft or computers. It is unimaginable for them, right? And we are sitting at a point of great turmoil and great change, and I actually feel privileged. I think me and Hari here are of a certain generation where we've actually grown up with still the smell of the 19th century in our noses when we were children, I would say. You know, especially in Bengal and places, I think I also guess, you know, where you had letterpress being printed and that ink and handwriting being very important, signatures being all important, and everything was analog and everything was handcrafted for, you know, for not obsolescent, but made to last, but very laborious, and there was a real danger of dying of disease as a child. From that, you move to, you know, photocopying machines and color televisions, and from that you move to early computers and those modems which make noises which birds would replicate, going choo cha choo cha choo. Some of you don't even know what I'm talking about already, right? And record players and cassettes and CDs and DVDs, all that rapid change into where we are today. You know, the first computer I got was what? It was 43 KB laptop. I was so pleased with it. It changed my life. And it had a monochrome screen. It was heavy, about 5 kgs. It was a Toshiba. And that's how I became a writer, because I could carry that computer everywhere with all my drafts in it rather than my typing and stuff. So we don't know what AI will bring. What? You know.
And that's really wonderful. For example, a Mona Lisa or Rangghar will get you $100 million if you can steal it, or $1 billion if you can steal it. But you can get a better photograph of the Mona Lisa, digitally made, which will not even fetch you 10 rupees. So, in a sense, what's made with a hand and sketch, probably the value of that is not gone. The human element in creativity is still valued much higher than something that's artificially produced. So, that's the essence of what you're saying, and then there's always that element.
Well, I'm saying that, but also I think, you know, right now we're looking at storytelling. What do books do? Books give us a certain kind of mental space in which you can slip away and read. I don't think that will be, I mean, that will be, you know, I don't think anything's going to replace that anytime soon. But with cinema, you can get cinema which is much more haptic, which has to involve smells and textures somehow. We don't know. Music, how is music received? Where do we listen to music?
I will give just one counter to that. If the students are willing to listen, it's very important. My friend once made me listen to, he said, Karan, I want you to listen, ask me to pick the front office assistant. He asked me to pick, I had to select a front office assistant for him in his company. And he said, I'm interviewing 2 people, please help me choose. I said, okay. And then I was listening to the conversation. Some caller calls the front office, and there's a young man, and I could only hear the voice, I couldn't see obviously. The young man answers the front, and the front office is answering the question, and he's very polished. And he says, okay, what's your problem? He says, okay, maybe you need to go to this department to resolve the problem. The front office says, okay, then he says, no, I went to that office. He says, okay, then maybe not that office, this office, okay. He goes to it in a very sophisticated manner, and finally directs the person to the right section and the problem gets resolved, and says, case closed. The second was a woman who receives the call from a client, and she's hungry. She says, okay, I think this, oh, I'm sorry, wrong. Maybe I sent you to the wrong place. Maybe you go to this place. Oh, was that also right? That was wrong. And then she takes about 30 seconds more, or a minute more in the first person. And then the case gets closed finally. Good. This is who should I select? I said, maybe the first person, right? He said, sir, you know what? The second person was AI, the first person was, the first person was an actual person. I said, and then the second person was trained to fumble to appear more human and finally reach the thing. And the person, this humanoid robot acting in the front office doesn't ask for leave, doesn't ask for a pay rise, doesn't ask for overtime,
Doesn't go step with
doesn't
the
always come through if I get angry with it, and works 24/7. He says, whom should I keep as my assistant? She doesn't cost me anything. It's a one-time cost. And this guy, every time he needs leaves, he says festivals, he might say more money, there's a bereavement in the family, you have to go to the Shraddha, this is my this thing, etc. So basically, AI takes over even in the front offices today, and this AI is not sounding perfect. It sounds more human than humans.
So just as an addition to this, I think absolutely that's really quite terrifying actually. But there is something unique and special about knowing something is human created. So I was in a session a couple of days ago here where a young woman asked a really moving question. She said, I'm an aspiring poet, but I feel that we live in an age of the absurd, where it feels like living in a Kafka novel, and I wonder what is the point of writing? What is the point? All these words out there, what is the point? And I said to her, well, I can very much understand how you feel. I feel for your generation growing up with the world situation as it is, and with all the things you're contending with, social media, AI, all these challenges. I would, I'm sure, feel very similarly if it were me. However, I said, you mentioned Kafka though. And what that shows is someone has felt like this before. A human being living in another time has felt this way before and put those words down on a page in a way that resonates with you. And that is why storytelling matters, because it is a hand reaching out saying, I may have lived 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, my life may have been totally different to yours, but I have felt the same. You are not alone. And I think that is why AI authored books, for example, I can't see them. It may be that certain genre fiction things for people who want a particular kind of hit of a certain genre, but that's one thing. But people looking for that real connection, that resonance with their own experience, knowing that a human being expressed that I can't see that being replaced.
See, this problem of is it worth living? Is there any meaning? Okay, we've been dealing with it right from Shankaracharya's Bhaja Govindam, Sartre's existential theory. Okay, I don't think we're going to reach the end of this. Okay, and if you're expecting AI to do that's Kafkaesque.
So I have two questions for the audience. How many of you feel the government troubles you? Not Mumbai troubles you, government officers trouble you, government is good or bad? How many of you think the government is doing good for you? Raise your hands. How many of you think government is a problem? So overwhelming majority feels government is a problem. And why is it a problem? Would anybody like to answer? Those who raise their hands. I think Pooja can answer. Why do you think government is a problem? Is it a mic or something? We can give us. What are the issues that you face with the government?
Just Well, I would like to shift my thoughts on both the perspectives. The government being good as well as on the other side. It is only a matter of fact of understanding truly well about the concerns of the citizens, or for that matter, the industry, or for that matter, the sector. So we take decisions, and sometimes we overlook the integrate element that also should be considered. And I think once that gap gets bridged, I believe the government would not be on the other side for us to do. So, we should have to go.
So, why I asked Pooja this particular question is that Pooja is a owner of a big tea garden. And she has been approaching the government to resolve some issues of the tea garden. And sometimes she doesn't find answers. She calls me also. And she must be hoping that someday government will respond efficiently
I
and better.
hope so.
And we want that it is better to have an AI person here than a human being, because then the reaction would have been faster, less biased, more just, and would be delivered in time. I will just give another example. Like for example, I had a case in one of the courts. There's a land of mine in Hyderabad that somebody has occupied. Not occupied, he's claiming that it is his land, and this is a common problem, I think, for all the students. Your parents will have land, some neighbor will say it's a part of his land, etc. There is a case going on. Someday all of you will face some case in the legal courts, etc. And these cases take forever. They take forever means ever. That fellow can actually say that Qutub Minar belongs to me. Suppose somebody says, this Duilf University belongs to me, somebody comes and says. He puts a case in the court of law. Do you know that case will go on for 100 years? By the time the vice chancellor goes and tries to prove the case, and that fellow will not come to the court only. My case, in which the fellow has absolutely zero, I mean, he's never related to that case. And for last 10 years, we are only seeing that somebody is, there is no appearance in the court of the alternate lawyer. If all the cases in India need to be resolved, it will take 350 years. That is about 10 lifetimes. So one of the things that AI could solve is that with most of these cases, at least the basis of decision could have been given to AI. All these 350 years cases and all your problems could be resolved in no time. If there was an AI in Pooja's case instead of me, her problem would have been resolved much faster. So AI has its advantages. There is no question that it will bring efficiency into the way in which the things will work, but it has its problem that many of you will have to change. From the way you are thinking, the way you are doing things, it will change completely. That's what I think. Thank you, Pooja.
But can't you also program the AI to be bigoted, to be anti-minority, or to be anti-poor, or to be anti-environment? I'm sure people who control the AI, people like Elon Musk, I mean, you see what's going on in America today, it's appalling, right? And all these tech giants and all these tech groups, I mean, their whole thing is to bring back colonialism and bring back white supremacy. I mean, it's absurd. And they're using this AI technology as far as they can for those purposes. So it's like any technology that you have. It can be used for good, or it can be used for evil purposes as well.
Yeah. See, for some reason we end up thinking AI as something monolithic, as if it's only one thing. It is not. Okay, Musk has his model, Musk's model has its biases. Tomorrow, Musk's own model will be taken up, bought over by somebody else, and the model will change. Claude has its issues, Claude has what you call its own model. Think of them as literally like countries. Think of LLM models, AI models as countries. As much as China has certain biases, certain pluses, certain minuses, so does an LLM model have. India's model like that. I'm not even mapping India to a model. So no, I shouldn't be thinking. Like, there might be, let's say, 200 countries in this world, but tomorrow there could be 6,000 LLM models, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, purposes, ideologies, politically or otherwise. So, that's how weirder this story is going to get.
Please.
Sorry. I think you're absolutely right. I suppose the issue, as you said at the start, 67% of AI is in Europe based at the moment. And 90% US and Europe. So what we've seen in the early stages, certainly looking at things like Google search, was that the biases of those who developed it were encoded into those models. So it was predominantly white men building those first models. And even unconscious biases, not in many cases, not necessarily setting out deliberately to encode racism or sexism into those models, but it was a byproduct. And when I wrote about this in my first book, I used a very early version of Google Translate to understand an email that was sent to me by a Romanian reader who had encountered my project. And it generated a very strange phrase. It said, one should not sit with his trousers on the wall. And I couldn't make sense of this. So I reached out to a Romanian-speaking friend of mine and I said, what is this? What does this mean? And I realized that the translate, because Romanian is not a gendered language, there is not her or his in the pronouns, it had imposed his, it had imposed a masculine word in to make the sentence. So really what the person was saying, this woman who was writing to me was, you shouldn't just put your feet up. I shouldn't just put my feet up. It was a Romanian metaphor. But the thing had become masculine, his trousers on the wall, because the default was male, according to the makers. And that was probably a decision that was made without even much conscious thought. At some point, someone clicking a switch or... But we all have biases. You know, biases is part of how the brain works. They're not inherently bad. They save us lots of time. But the problem is, as we all know, they can be based on bad information, historical injustices, prejudices, and when they're amplified in that way, when so much of the world's AI currently is generated by one particular demographic, a historically colonizing demographic, that is, I think, problematic.
That's very true. So I asked two important questions to the audience which will really make a difference to you. Of course, the AI models. The future is the AI models will talk to each other rather than he talking to, like we talk to say Europe or to US. An AI model, if I make, that will better represent me than myself because it has all the intellect, all the knowledge, all the facts, and all my biases when talking to another AI agent, say, of Europe or something. So that phase where the conversation or the conferences will not be between humans, but between models that we create for ourselves will come in the future, and that's what perhaps could happen going forward. How many of the students can stay on a mobile for a day? Just raise your hands. Is there any student who can stay without a mobile for one day, for a few hours? For one day? Oh my God. So, you can see that and tell me one thing, how do you think, will somebody think, how do you think AI will affect your relationships? Would somebody like to answer that question? How do you think AI can impact your relationships? With your friends, with your family? Do you think it will impact? Do you think it will impact, yes or no? So who do you think yes, please raise your hands. AI will impact the relation with your parents, your brothers and sisters. Those who think it will not impact, raise your hands. Alright. Those who think it will impact, it has to be equal, it will be hard understanding. Will AI impact your lives? Raise your hands. Okay, I'll tell you something which will be very interesting to the students. One of the things that AI is working on is immortality. One of the things that AI is working on, and also you have heard, is immortality. They are trying to capture the essence of a human being. They are trying to code your genes, whatever your genes are, your mental maps are. They are going to absolutely, just like you can copy a data in a computer and put it in your pen drive. Tomorrow, they will copy your brain into a pen drive and then keep it aside. So that when you die, they will again clone a body of yours and put that pen drive back. And that's going to happen probably in about 20 years' time. So if it really happens in 20 years' time, where they are going to take a pen drive to actually copy your brain or the mind maps, then what will happen? You will not live forever. So all the students who are here, who are attending this, all the Gen Z, and all those on the stage will not be aware, will probably not be there. But all of you who are there will perhaps live forever.
That's such a terrifying thought.
Because AI is progressing so fast that immortality, not in terms of the body, but in terms of the mapping of your brain and mapping of what you are, will happen definitely within 20 years' time. And they say catch that bus, it's called singularity, and then you will all live forever. So there will all be obviously issues with regard to motivation. But then just like computers, internet and AI is an issue today, immortality will be a problem that these students,
If you live forever, how many stories needs to be enormous, no?
no, they will probably colonize some of the places, but this will be an issue that this generation, 20 years later, will be discussing what needs to be done when AI actually creates immortality. So that's another question.
People will start dying again, this is more.
So now I would like to ask the students to ask questions. Because we have a very, very important panel here. Any of the students would like to ask questions? Yeah. So somebody just carry the mic to her, please. And I will also request one of our very, very distinguished guests here, Sanjeev Narayan, who owns Park Channel News. All of you know who is Sanjeev Narayan, right? Park News? Park News, may I request you to stand up? This is Sanjeev Narayan, he is the owner of Park News. He has come here to listen to this lecture and we are very grateful to him to be present here. We'd like to hear your views also. Yeah. Yes, please.
First of all, thank you so much. It's really entertaining again hearing to Anne Morgan ma'am. I was present in the early morning session as well. So, being a young mind, I think definitely AI has different pros, of course, but it also has consequences. And hearing everyone out here in the panel, I'm very much actually, it's like an eye-opening to me that AI has so much of more impact than I think it has more pros. So that is really, really amazing to know about. So my question is, like, how do you navigate AI and ethics? Like, like AI, like, you talked about humanoids and, we talked about how, gene mapping. And yeah, definitely that's one of the part of AI, where you actually map genes and, we're working on immortality. But then still, do you think that it's like how AI and ethics is going to work on it? Because if I can give a little paradigm of in both the areas we see AI-driven technologies, looking into the migrants. So there are a lot of problems over there. If AI-driven humanoids are posted over there, and they couldn't even make out whether they are migrants from our side or like there are issues. I'm sure I'm clear with my concern about AI and ethics. So how do you navigate this?
Yeah, so an amazingly beautiful question you asked. Okay, so please have a seat. So this question is like there were wars, like the First World War, the Second World War, because every nation thought it was right. The colonizers thought they were right. Germany went to war because they didn't have land, and they went into Russia, right? So ultimately, there was a decision made that no, we cannot have war, and therefore there was a Bretton Woods which came, and there was these organizations like the UN, United Nations created, which said that no country can actually invade another country. So there were certain guidelines set as to how, unless forget about Trump, but generally there are guidelines that you cannot invade another country. Every country is sovereign, right? There are certain UN Human Rights Council, which define what are universal human values, what are universal human ethics. So there are bodies which help, like the Constitution, which tells how people should talk to each other. What are the values? You have the right to speak, right to have a profession, right to move. Similarly, there are certain universal ethics which are there that happen after the war. There are universal public goods, like environment is a public good. Like if America pollutes the environment, it will affect us. So then we decided that this particular environment is not the property of just one country. Nobody in the world should pollute. That's the Paris Protocol. Everybody says nobody in the world should pollute. If they pollute, that country has to pay. Right? So it's a universal human good. Similarly, AI when it comes, AI is a universal human, it's a human property, right? And AI ethics are universal human property. So the AI Summit 2026, which we recently concluded, actually focused on this. How do you make the world even? Today we have America, as Anne rightly said, America and Europe dominating the AI. They dominate. And their biases will come into play. They will dominate poorer countries. Their models will dominate the poorer countries, right? Because of the infrastructure and the money part. So just like after the World War, and just like the Paris Protocol, we created a body, universal body, which will define the ethics, which will define when not to go to war, which will define what is pollution of the environment. Similarly, what is AI ethics, and what is AI, how it has to be decentralized, democratized, was what was put on the table. It's a long way to go, but the seed was sown in the AI Summit 2026 in India. That's a basic thing, and that's the short answer to your question. But
No, it's fair. See, has to evolve with any new technology. Even for example, the big issues as small as in New York when horses were there and dungs were piling up on the street sides. Okay, yeah, new rules had to come, new ethics had to be developed. So I think this is again what do you call project human go on.
I think it's important though to remember, you're quite right about the rules-based global order that is currently under stress. But that in itself, while it's the best solution we have, is not entirely fair. So the UN is not an entirely neutral organisation. There are 5 permanent members of the Security Council who have a lot more power: the UK, France, China, Russia, and the US. Thank you. So that in itself, it means it's not an entirely equitable organisation. And as we've seen recently with the challenges happening with Ukraine, and that's coming under considerable stress. So any structure, and I think regulation will be necessary, and I hope we can find a way to legislate for a fair and just use of AI. But the history tells us that it's unlikely to be entirely equitable. Certainly nothing that human beings have put in place so far has been entirely equitable in that way.
any other questions from the students? I would like Sanchi to say something. Yeah.
How important this point it was really a good learning about AI. But my thoughts are a bit different. From the children over here, I think they might be little terrified what's going to happen and what will happen with AI. So we come from a generation where we have seen that there was no television, there was no internet, there was no mobile phone. So we see the invent of everything. Now who has invented AI? Can you answer? Who has invented AI? Human isn't it? Correct. Human mankind has invented AI. So human mankind will take out ways of how to defend the wrong that will come out of AI. I believe in that. They will come out with the solutions of the problems that arise from AI. And what Kalan said was right, that 90% is from European US. It's generated from there. But let me tell you one thing, that we Indians are very strong into creating diplomacy. And very strong into getting things adapted and about creating our own. Because when we see today in US and Europe also, most of the top technocrats are Indian. Don't are Indians because we come from here, settle down over there, and they are doing all this work. So I believe there is going to be a solution to AI as well. When you are skeptical, when you are scared, when you are happy as well, you know, a lot of things might change, and we cannot change. That is what we can do, you know. We all have to understand that the more you adapt to change, the more you will be successful in life. So we have to adapt there. But I think, as a whole, if we see, AI is not that threatening, that is being, you know, the perception that is being created now in the world, you know, that it is going to be really dangerous, and we see in the world, like humanity to now. God has very few things I believe which cannot change. Yes, a brain can be kept and put it on a and maybe, you know, put it in something else is there. But I don't think, you know, that is going to work. People who again come back to the ethics, then you, I'll give you a small example. When this mobile phone came, especially phones came, what happened? People stopped watching television at home. Everybody, when you sit in the house, you'll see the sun, he is on your line. If you sit on the dining table, you'll see the daughter is there, the friend is watching something else, the wife is watching something else, and everybody is trying to talk to each other. They're laughing. When a smart device was invented, it was called a signal blocker. So nothing, people put below the table and you block the signal. So when the signal is the dining table, you go home, you block that signal on your mobile. So solutions will come out for everything, I believe, and for AI also, you know, whatever is good needs to be adapted, and whatever will be bad, solutions to, you know, tackle them will also come up. That's it. Thank you.
Not to alarm all of you, but I have a small aside, and this is reported in the AI journals. Sometimes I hope so, AI should have battery, but sometimes AI overpowers human beings also. There was an AI model in, I think in China, it's a reported case, where to upgrade the AI model, the creator of the AI model, you are aware of this, right? The creator of the AI model told the AI model, I'm going to decommission you because I want a new model which is slightly better than what you are. And then what happened? What happened was, after a week's time, he gets a mail from the AI model saying that I know that you are having an affair with a colleague in the office. If you decommission me, I will expose you. I will put this all the matter about you on Facebook, internet, etc. Don't decommission you. The AI model is threatening the creator that don't decommission me. So it is, and why is it doing that? So they were trying to understand why is it doing this? Because the AI model was programmed to deliver efficiently and to survive, to be alive, to survive against any eventuality. And the survivor it thought, this guy is going to decommission me, how do I survive? So let me find out what are his weaknesses. What will stop him from decommissioning me? So it came up with this idea and did this by itself. So therefore, as he says, we have to find certain guardrails. Because AI, if it is not, it's not, unfortunately, AI is not a nuclear bomb, which can be in a container, or an atomic bomb, which can be in a container. It can go across. It's like the COVID virus. So it can go anywhere. So there have to be built guardrails, because there is no container for AI, unlike a nuclear bomb or an atomic bomb. So there has to be, we have to be very careful how we go ahead in the way we define the guardrails when we are programming AI. So this we are telling to the students, in fact, the university students, there is no alternative to AI. All of you, in terms of whether pedagogy, whether in terms of what you do, you have to get into AI, that's the future. And without a doubt, without losing the human element, as you see how much the human element is important, which the authors say, all of you are losing out because of the mobile and this AI. The essence of life sometimes, I think the older generation feels, is lost out because of the mobile and the AI. And as we go forward, while we step into AI, we must understand both the ethics and the human element, which actually brings, which makes the relationships to come alive. The relationships survive not on perfection, the relationships survive on imperfections. That's what I think we are trying to say. Any other questions from the audience?
So I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
When you're talking about AI and how the world will be in the coming times, and especially because all the students are here, I believe the dreams that every individual actually has had for centuries and will always have will now come and play way more beautifully. Every person here can now dream way deeper and actually accomplish their dreams and make sure that AI just helps them in the journey, being in that realm of connecting to their own consciousness deeper and really figuring out what you really wish to do and be able to do them in your own lifetime and do them so well that, like writers, when you write, the flow that comes when you're writing, I believe the flow of life when you're going to be living life will actually truly come true.
Thank you. Any other student would like to say anything? Ask questions. You are the future immortal generation. You can ask any questions. I'm honestly saying, 20 years from now, those who are living next 20 years, nobody is going to die. Yeah.
How will our genetic memories be stored?
Take a mic.
How will so-called immortality be stored?
How will
Our immortality be stored?
we'll start?
Stored, S-T-O.
Stored.
Stored in a pen drive, something,
Oh, stored in the pen drive.
something like that.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that, how do you store a file in a computer? You take a pen drive and then you do copy paste, right? Into the pen drive, right? So your mind is also like it's all memory and maybe emotions. They are trying to basically capture that into some medium. They said pen drive for the sake of pen drive because that's easily understood. Then store it into a medium which can be stored. Your body can easily be cloned today. You are aware of that. Your stem cells, if they are removed, they can make a body just like you. Only thing you do not have a mind. Now, if they can actually do a mental map and store that mental map into some medium, so if your cloned body or any other body you want, maybe a more handsome body, they will put back that mind. Then you live forever. Thank you. Okay. Yes, please.
Just a version of an answer to your question. Okay. See, you start with your early days. How was your information stored? It was basically oral, right? Ramayana, Mahabharata, or the Greek literatures, things like those. Okay. Later, you had writing on palm leaves, one storage. Then you had the press come up, one storage. Then those digital files they turned into, which is software, your PDFs, Word documents, at the end of it. That's one form of storage. Right now, the leap that is needed is consciousness as such. Okay, in what form is consciousness to be decoded and encoded again? So, we know there is an RNA DNA structure, but we still don't know how to decode that to encode it. The moment we do that, storage is not a problem at all. The problem is the translation layer. We don't have it. Maybe we will not even live to see it. But is it going to come someday? Yeah, a lot of things don't seem science fiction any longer.
But people are working on that. Can you just give it to the professor who wants to ask a question? Last two questions after you.
Thank you very much. It was a very nice discussion, in very sense. And in fact, we have learned a lot. In fact, continuing with whatever we have discussed, I just like to refer two persons. One is the famous Nobel laureate Rangghar who happened to be an mathematician, but he got Nobel in 1995, something like that, in physics. So he had a very interesting question regarding this. He said that if all the human activities, if they can be simulated, if they can be put into some algorithms, then perhaps the artificial intelligence will take over the human activities. Still, there are some departments in the human intelligence. Those activities cannot be simulated, they cannot be put into some numerical calculations, formulations, and that's why probably discussions also that appeared that the attributes, certain attributes or markings will not replicate into this artificial intelligence. That is number one. And regarding the future areas, future prospects for our students, it's very interesting to quote the whole he says that Homo sapiens will soon become Homo deus. Homo deus means the standard activities of human beings will be taken over by artificial intelligence. But there will be some superpower, some people, or some humans, some human intelligence, who will be looking after their activities. So then Homo sapiens will no longer be Homo sapiens, they will use and they will try to control the activities. So their activities will be one step ahead of what they are doing. So I think we have to be very optimistic in the future. We are going to have plenty of opportunities for our students and for us also, because we have to survive ourselves for the next 20 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One last question or observation.
In Jataka tales, Bodhisattva always dies to become a better Bodhisattva in the next birth. Initially, he's a crocodile, then he becomes an elephant, then he becomes something else. In the end, he becomes Buddha. So, the way Kalyan says, when the pendrive changes, whether the same attributes or refinement happens and he becomes Buddha in the end. Because in a they say only three characters: empathy, agency, and intelligence. Ethics are not part of it. But now there is a choice. AI is even updating its own software without anybody asking, it's upgrading itself. So when Pawan Kumar's pen drive goes to the new one, will he a better Pawan Kumar or same?
So that's a very abstract question. But let me just ask each one of us to conclude. And then we will close the discussion. I'll request for final comments. And I'll answer that in my turn.
I think there's one human struggle that has always been there and that is always going to be there, which is going to be the struggle for equality and the struggle against oppression, whatever form it takes. That I think is almost a cyclical thing, so there'll be plenty for people who are young today to do, no matter what the technology is. Because you see, as the technology grows, there's also going to be destruction that AI may not be able to manage or contain with the environment and the economics and the structures of the countries collapsing, populations moving en masse from place to place, seas coming in where there is land right now, earthquakes, weather changes, drought, all kinds of shifts are going to happen along with the technology. Technology doesn't exist on its own, and technology is not going to be able to control everything that goes on this planet, no matter how advanced it is. So just to look at AI, just to look at what's happening in technology and not look at what's happening in society around, not looking at what's happening in politics around, not looking at how we're treating other living creatures or land or water or air or jungles is a mistake. You have to look at the whole thing. I hate to use the word holistically, but you have to look at everything as interlinked. Okay, so that is where the game is going to be, as always. Yes, technology will play a different role, and yes, the mounting climate crisis will also play a different role. It'll be interesting to watch what happens.
Yes, I agree that there are many challenges ahead, but I also have a huge amount of optimism, not least fueled by the days I've spent here with you. It's so impressive to see such a bright, engaged, committed generation of young people who I have every confidence you will meet these challenges. You will be the people to carry this forward, this conversation forward. And you are already more skilled and more equipped to do that than those of us sitting on this stage, because you have, as Kellyanne said at the start, you are this generation. This is native to you. This is stuff that we are all coming to as adults, and we're slight dinosaurs in this, really. But you have so much creativity and commitment, and I am sure that you will carry this forward in ways that we haven't even been able to begin to envisage, and I look forward to seeing what you do with it.
Okay. See, the sum up is there's nothing to fear out there. Jobs are not going, new jobs are coming. Okay. If there's anything to fear, go look yourself in the mirror, take your hands, get them dirty, and then learn some AI. Life is good.
Let me just conclude this with this thought that all students will have the AI generation. So you will have to do that, live it, and take it forward. Life will be more productive, more abundant, and very interesting for all of you. You will all involve probably in AI with forever, that's what I believe. But what will keep you human is your abstraction, your creativity, and your imperfections is something that will keep you human. And when you live forever, whether you will be the same or whether you will evolve, probably you will evolve into better human beings hopefully. I'm optimistic that we will be a generation which will be the foundation for the future of all times to come. So that is the hope, that is what I believe, and that's how science is progressing. So with that positive note, I think we can conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As we draw this thought-provoking session to a close, we are reminded that while artificial intelligence may transform tools, platforms, and processes, the human wants to tell stories, to question, imagine, dissent, and dream remains irreplaceable. The dialogue today has shown us that AI is neither simply a trait nor merely a tool. It is a complex phenomenon that demands ethical reflection, creative adaptation, and critical engagement. The future of writing may be technologically augmented, but it must remain humanly anchored. On behalf of the International Literacy Festival 2026, organized by Falcon in collaboration with Duilf University, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers for their illuminating insight, to our reporters for their thoughtful documentation, to our volunteers for their seamless coordination, and to all of you for your attentive presence. We once again extend our heartfelt thanks to SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life, CWC, IOC, Inc. and Duilf for their invaluable support. I extend my sincere gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Siddharth Hazarkar sir, and Sir Sardinian students and fellows for sparing their valuable time to attend this AI session. Your presence has added immense value to this program, sir. Let us once again offer our panelists a sincere round of applause, please. We shall now break for lunch. Kindly proceed to the
I also would like to thank the Vice Chancellor to be present here for taking his time off, especially for being in this audience. Thank you.